I always believed my stepfather's favorite insult was just cruelty until I handed my paperwork to the county clerk. She stared at my social security number, swallowed hard, and whispered that it was flagged. Before I could explain, a woman with a federal badge entered the room. She looked me in the eye and said I was not just an abandoned child, but a missing one who had been stolen for 29 years. My name is Nora Green. That is the name I answer to. The name on the driver's license I keep buried deep in a wallet that has seen better days, and the name I have used to build a wall around myself for 30 years. People often tell me I am too hard, too quiet, or that I act like I do not need anyone. They are right. I learned a long time ago that needing people is a dangerous weakness. If you are hungry, you do not ask for food. You find a way to earn it, or you starve in silence. If you are cold, you put on another layer. You never, ever ask to be let in. To ask is to give someone the power to say no. And I decided when I was barely a teenager that I was done giving anyone that kind of leverage over my life. I have spent my adult life existing in the margins, working jobs that pay in cash or checks that barely clear, living in apartments where the landlords do not ask questions as long as the rent is in the mailbox by the first of the month. I am proud of that. I am proud that I owe nothing to a single soul on this earth. But that pride is just a scar tissue over a wound that opened when I was 11 years old, sitting at a dining room table that smelled of lemon polish and pot roast. That was the first time my stepfather, Darren Kincaid, said the words that would become the soundtrack of my adolescence. It was not a scream. That is what people do not understand about Darren. He was not a man of violent outbursts or thrown plates. He was a man of terrifying, absolute calm. He was an accountant by trade and by nature. He tallied affection like he tallied tax deductions, and I was always in the red. We were sitting at dinner. I remember the meal perfectly because it was meatloaf, my favorite, though I had learned not to say it was my favorite because Darren often stopped buying things I expressed too much joy over. I had asked, quietly, if I could have $20 for a school field trip. It was a standard fee for a science excursion to the local museum. Darren had stopped chewing. He placed his fork down with a deliberate, metallic click against the china. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, folded it, and looked at me. He did not look at me with anger. He looked at me with the same detached curiosity one might have for a stray dog that had wandered onto the porch. "You do not understand, Nora," he had said. His voice was smooth, lacking any jagged edges. "I work for this money. I provide this house. I provide this food. These things are for my family, for my blood. You are not my blood." I looked at my mother, Beth. I always looked at her in those moments, waiting for the defense that was surely coming. Mothers are supposed to be the shield. They are supposed to be the primal force that stands between their child and the world. But Beth Kincaid was not a shield. She was a ghost in her own home. She sat there, staring intently at the green beans on her plate, her fork moving them around in small, nervous circles. She did not look up. She did not say, "Darren, she is my daughter." She just shrank, making herself smaller, as if she could disappear right into the upholstery of the chair. Her silence was a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was an endorsement. That was the night the line was drawn. It was not just about the $20. It was about the hierarchy of our existence. From that day on, Darren made sure I understood that everything I received was charity, not a right. My stepsister, Jade, was 3 years younger than me. She was Darren's biological daughter, and the contrast between us was painted in vivid, painful colors every single day. Jade was allowed to turn up the thermostat if she was cold. I was told to put on a sweater because heating oil cost money. Jade found new clothes on her bed before school started in September. I was told to be grateful for the things from the donation bin because beggars could not be choosers. Jade was not cruel. That would have been easier to handle. Honestly, if she had been mean, I could have hated her. But Jade was soft and confused. She would sneak candy bars into my room or try to share her allowance with me. I usually refused. I was terrified that Darren would find out. I knew that if he caught her giving me anything, he would not yell at her. He would look at me with that cold, dead stare and tell me I was a thief, taking things that belonged to his blood. So I pushed Jade away. I taught myself to be an island inside that house. I stopped eating dinner with them by the time I was 14. I would wait until they were done, until the dishes were washed and the lights were dimmed, and then I would creep into the kitchen to eat toast, or whatever leftovers were deemed garbage. I lived like a squatter in a suburban home. I walked softly on the floorboards, so I would not creak. I kept my voice low. I tried to occupy as little space as possible, hoping that if I made myself small enough, Darren would forget to tax me for the air I breathed. But the ultimate lesson came on my 18th birthday. Most kids look at 18 as the gateway to freedom. They think of parties, lottery tickets, and voting. I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach that felt like a fist. I knew something was coming. The atmosphere in the house had been shifting for weeks. Darren had been organizing papers in his office, the door shut tight. My mother had been walking around with red-rimmed eyes, avoiding me even more than usual. When I came downstairs, there was no cake. There were no balloons. There were 2 large, beat-up suitcases standing by the front door. They were already packed. Darren was sitting in the living room, a folder on his lap. My mother was sitting next to him, twisting a tissue in her hands until it was just white lint. "Happy birthday, Nora," Darren said. He did not smile. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down. We have business to discuss." I sat. The leather of the chair felt cold against my legs. I looked at the suitcases, then at him. "You are a legal adult today," he stated. "That means my obligation, however thin it was, is officially over. You are not my blood. I have housed you and fed you out of the kindness of my heart, but that contract expires today." He opened the folder and slid a document across the coffee table toward me. It was thick, stapled in the corner. "This is a voluntary departure agreement," he explained, as if we were closing a business deal rather than kicking a child onto the street. "It states that you are leaving of your own free will, that you have received all your personal effects, and that you have no further financial claim on this household. It also states that you agree to sever contact for a minimum of 5 years to allow Jade to focus on her studies without distraction." I looked at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. Sever contact. No financial claim. I do not understand. I whispered. My voice sounded thin, pathetic. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That is not my concern." Darren said, "You have 2 hours to sign this and vacate the premises. If you do not sign, I will call the police and have you removed as a trespasser. And Nora." He leaned forward, his eyes devoid of anything human. "If the police come, I will make sure they know you have been stealing from us. I have the records ready." It was a lie. I had never stolen a penny, but I knew, with chilling certainty, that he could make it look like I had. He was an accountant. He could make numbers say whatever he wanted them to say. I looked at my mother. "Mom," I said. She flinched. She looked at Darren, then at her hands, then finally, fleetingly, at me. Her face was a mask of terror and exhaustion. "Just sign it, Nora," she whispered. "Please, just sign it and go." "You are kicking me out?" I asked, the tears finally spilling over despite my best efforts to hold them back. Beth did not answer. She reached out and took the pen Darren held out to her. She signed the witness line first. Her hand was shaking so badly that the signature looked like a seismograph reading of an earthquake. I realized then that I had no choice. I was 18 with no money, no car, and no allies. I took the pen. I felt the weight of it, heavy and final. I signed my name, Nora Green. With that signature, I was signing away the only roof I had. Darren took the papers back instantly, checking the signature to ensure it was legible. "Good," he said. "You have $40 in your pocket. I put it in your coat. That is more than you deserve." I stood up. My legs felt like they were made of wood. I walked to the door and grabbed the handles of the suitcases. They were heavy, filled with the clothes I had scrounged and the few books I had managed to keep hidden. Jade came running down the stairs then. She must have been listening from the hallway. She had been crying. Her face was blotchy and swollen. "Nora!" She screamed. She threw herself at me, wrapping her arms around my neck. "You cannot go, Daddy." "Stop it, Jade. Go to your room," Darren said. His voice did not rise, but the threat in it was unmistakable. Jade ignored him for a second, squeezing me tight. "I will find you." She sobbed into my ear. "I promise. I will find you." I gently pried her arms off me. I could not look at her. If I looked at her, I would collapse, and I refused to give Darren the satisfaction of seeing me break. I needed to walk out of there on my own 2 feet. I opened the front door. The air outside was crisp, biting. "Wait," my mother said. I paused on the threshold. She hurried over, blocking Darren's view with her body for a split second. She shoved a small, crumpled bag of trail mix into my hand. It was pathetic. A snack for the road. She leaned in close, ostensibly to fix my collar, but her lips brushed my ear. Her breath was hot and smelled of stale coffee. "Don't let them find you," she hissed. I pulled back, staring at her. "What go?" she said, her voice returning to a flat, defeated monotone. "Just go, Nora." I did not understand. "Don't let who find me." I thought she meant the police. Or maybe she meant I should hide from the shame of being homeless. It made no sense. But there was a frantic intensity in her eyes that scared me more than Darren's coldness. I stepped out onto the porch. The door clicked shut behind me. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door. I was 18 years old. I had $40, 2 suitcases, and a bag of trail mix. I had just signed a paper agreeing that I was a stranger to the people who had raised me. I walked down the driveway. I did not look back at the house. I told myself I was not walking away from a home. I was escaping a prison, but as I reached the sidewalk and turned toward the main road, the hollow feeling in my chest told a different story. I was not just alone. I was unmoored. I was a boat with the rope cut, drifting into a dark, open ocean. And the worst part was the voice in my head, sounding exactly like Darren. Not my blood. Not my blood. I believed him. I believed I was nothing. And for the next 12 years, I made sure I lived exactly like nothing. I disappeared, just like my mother told me to, though I never understood why she was so afraid. I dragged my suitcases toward the bus stop, the wheels rumbling on the pavement like thunder. I did not know then that the woman watching me from the window was not just a coward. She was a keeper of secrets that were rotting her from the inside out. I did not know that the name Nora Green was just a mask I had been forced to wear. All I knew was that I had to keep moving. If I stopped, the truth of my loneliness would catch up to me, and I was not strong enough to face it yet. So I walked. I walked until the house was just a speck behind me, and then I walked some more. The first few nights of my so-called freedom were not spent exploring the world or tasting the sweet air of independence. They were spent curled in the fetal position in the back seat of a rusted sedan I had bought for $600 cash, parked behind a 24-hour laundromat because the lights there stayed on all night. I learned quickly that darkness was not my friend. Darkness was where the fear crept in, whispering that Darren was right, that I was incapable of survival. So I slept under the hum of neon signs and the rattle of dryer vents. Eventually, I made it to Lakewood Crossing. It was one of those Midwestern towns that felt like it had been built entirely out of gray concrete and gray sky. I found a room above a pawn shop. The landlord, a man with yellow eyes and a scent of stale tobacco, did not ask for a credit check. He just asked for $450 a month, paid in cash. On the first, the room was the size of a large closet. The radiator hissed like a dying snake, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall, but it had a lock on the door. That lock was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. I built a life there. It was a small, hard life, but it was mine. I stopped thinking about the future and started thinking in shifts. I worked breakfast at a diner where the grease coated my skin like a second layer of pores. I worked the register at a gas station on the interstate, watching people drive to places I would never go. But the anchor of my existence was Stonebridge Fulfillment. Stonebridge was a massive warehouse on the edge of town. a sprawling beast of corrugated metal and fluorescent lights that never turned off. I was a picker. I spent 10 hours a night walking concrete floors, strapping a scanner to my forearm that beeped every 3 seconds. Beep, pick item, beep, scan bin, beep, place in tote. It was rhythmic. It was numbing. It was perfect. I did not make friends. I saw the other workers in the break room, huddling over vending machine coffee, complaining about their spouses or their debts. I stayed in the corner. Relationships were variables I could not control, and my life was a strict equation: input labor, output rent, input silence, output safety. I trusted the time clock on the wall more than I trusted any human being. That machine was honest. If I gave it 8 hours, it gave me 8 hours of pay. It never changed its mind. It never told me I did not belong. I took pride in my invisibility. I wore steel-toed boots that were 2 sizes too big because I found them at a thrift store, and I wrapped my feet in extra socks to make them fit. I ate instant noodles and hard-boiled eggs. I never asked for a shift trade. I never asked for a ride. I was the model employee, the one who never complained, the one who simply absorbed the workload like a sponge. But the body is not a machine, no matter how much you try to treat it like one. The collapse did not happen all at once. It was a slow, grinding erosion that started in my right shoulder. We were moving into the holiday rush at Stonebridge. The quotas had gone up. We were expected to pick 300 items an hour. I was lifting a case of motor oil from a bottom shelf when I felt something snap deep inside my shoulder joint. It was not a loud noise, just a dull, sickening pop followed by a rush of heat. I dropped the box. I did not call for a medic. I knew that reporting an injury meant drug tests, paperwork, and potentially being let go as a liability. I gritted my teeth, picked up the box with my left hand, and finished the shift. By morning, I could not lift my arm above my waist. 2 days later, the fever hit. It was a brutal strain of flu that was tearing through the warehouse floor. Usually, I would have worked through a cold. I had worked through migraines, cramps, and sprained ankles, but this was different. My temperature spiked to 103 degrees. My joints felt like they were being crushed in a vice. The combination of the fever and the shoulder injury rendered me incapacitated. I lay on my mattress, shivering so hard my teeth chattered. Staring at the water stains on the ceiling, I called in sick. I hated making the call. I hated the weakness in my voice. The shift supervisor, a man named Rick, who looked at employees as if we were broken toaster ovens, sighed into the phone. "You know the policy. Nora," he said, "we are in blackout dates for the holiday rush. If you are not here, I have to mark it. I cannot lift my arm." "Rick," I rasped, "and I am contagious." "Right," he said. "Well, take the day. We will see about tomorrow." I took 3 days. I had no choice. Every time I tried to stand, the room spun. On the 4th day, I dragged myself out of bed, popped 4 ibuprofen, and called the warehouse to say I was coming in. Rick did not answer. I left a voicemail. I went to the warehouse anyway, desperate to reclaim my spot on the line. My badge did not work at the turnstile. The light flashed red. Access denied. I waited at the security desk for 20 minutes until Rick came out. He did not look me in the eye. We had to fill the spot. "Nora," he said, looking at his clipboard, "we could not wait. We are a high-volume facility." "Am I fired?" I asked. The fever was still humming in my blood, making the world look sharp and too bright. "We will keep your resume on file," he said, using the corporate script that meant you are dead to us. "We will call you if volume increases." They never called. The downward spiral was instantaneous. I had no savings. I lived paycheck to paycheck, and the loss of the Stonebridge checks was catastrophic. My rent was due in 6 days. I had $40 in my bank account. I needed antibiotics. I needed to pay for the heat, which was included in the rent, but would be cut off if I was evicted. I sat in my room, wrapped in 3 blankets, counting the coins in my jar. I calculated the cost of food versus the cost of medicine. If I did not eat for 3 days, I could afford the generic prescription. If I did not pay the rent, I had 30 days before the sheriff came. Maybe less since I had no lease. Then the phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. But the area code made my heart stop. It was from home, or rather, from the place I used to live. I stared at the vibrating screen. It could have been a wrong number, but my gut told me otherwise. I answered, not saying a word. Nora. The voice was older, but I knew it. It was Jade. I almost hung up. My thumb hovered over the red button, but the silence in my room was so loud, so crushing, that the sound of her voice was like a lifeline I was terrified to grab. Jade, I said. My voice was rusty. Oh my God, she breathed. You picked up. I have been trying every number I could find online. I found an old employment listing for a gas station, Nora. Are you okay? The question hung in the air. Was I okay? I was unemployed, feverish, injured, and terrified. I was sitting in a room that smelled of mildew, contemplating whether to buy bread or painkillers. I am fine, I said. The lie came out smooth. Practiced. I am doing great. Jade, where are you? She asked. Can I come see you? Or can I send you something? No, I said sharply. No, I am busy. I have a good job. I am traveling a lot for work. Traveling, that is amazing. Darren said you would probably be well. Never mind what he said. The mention of his name was like a bucket of ice water. I do not care what he said. I snapped. Listen, Jade, I have to go. I have a meeting. Nora, wait, she pleaded. Just are you happy I looked at the empty walls? I looked at the bottle of ibuprofen that was almost empty. Yes, I said, I am happy. Do not call me again. Jade, it is better this way. I hung up. I put the phone on the floor, and then, for the first time in 12 years, I pulled my knees to my chest and cried. I did not make a sound. I had learned to cry silently so Darren would not hear me through the walls, and the habit stuck. My chest heaved. My throat burned, but the room remained quiet. The next morning, the fever broke, but the reality set in. I had to do something. I could not starve. I could not go back to sleeping in a car. Not in this condition. My shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. I needed a doctor, and I needed help. The idea of asking for assistance made me nauseous. It went against every layer of armor I had built. You do not beg. You do not ask. But I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My cheeks were hollow. My eyes were dark pits. I looked like a ghost. It is not begging. I told my reflection. It is a procedure. I have paid taxes. I worked. This is a system transaction. I washed my face. I put on my cleanest shirt. A button-down I used for interviews. I combed my hair back tight. I gathered my birth certificate, my driver's license, and my termination notice from Stonebridge. I walked to the Broward County Community Services office. It was a 3-mile walk. The wind cut through my coat, biting at my injured shoulder. But I kept walking. I focused on the pavement. Left foot, right foot. Do not think. Just move. The office was exactly as I feared. It was a fluorescent purgatory. There were rows of plastic chairs bolted to the floor, filled with people who looked tired, defeated, or angry. Children were crying. A security guard stood by the door, looking bored. I took a number, 42. They were on number 19. I sat and waited. I held my folder of documents against my chest like a shield. I rehearsed what I would say. I am between jobs. I have a temporary medical issue. I need short-term assistance until I can return to the workforce. It sounded professional. It sounded like I was in control. 3 hours passed. My shoulder was screaming in pain. I felt lightheaded from the lack of food. Number 42. A voice called out. I stood up. I walked to the window. The woman behind the glass looked exhausted. Her name tag said, Brenda. She did not look up. Fill this out, she said, sliding a clipboard through the slot, front and back. Do not skip any fields. I took the clipboard to a small table. The pen was chained to the desk. I began to write. Name Nora Green. Date of birth, June 14th. Address 402 Elm Street. Apt 3B. I reached the section for the Social Security number. My hand hovered for a second. That 9-digit number was the only thing that felt truly permanent in my life. It was the number on my pay stubs, on my tax forms, on the few bank accounts I had opened and closed. It was me. I wrote the numbers down. 3 digits, 2 digits, 4 digits. I signed the bottom of the form. I walked back to the window and slid the clipboard under the glass. Brenda took it. She began to type. Her fingers moved fast, a rhythmic clacking that reminded me of the warehouse scanners. I watched her face. I expected her to ask for a pay stub or a utility bill. I expected her to tell me I did not qualify because I had not been a resident of the county long enough. Suddenly, her typing stopped. It was not a gradual stop. It was an abrupt, jarring halt. Her hands froze in midair over the keyboard. She blinked. She leaned closer to the screen, squinting. Then she pulled her glasses off, cleaned them on her sweater, and put them back on. She looked at the screen again. The color drained from her face. It was instant. One moment she was flushed with the heat of the office, and the next she was pale, pasty white. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, but they were not looking at me like I was an applicant anymore. She was looking at me like I was something she had never seen before, like I was a hallucination. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was trembling. She cleared her throat and tried again, but it came out as a whisper. "Is this number correct?" She pointed a shaking finger at the SSN I had written. "Yes," I said, confusion beginning to prickle at the back of my neck. "That is my number." "Why is there a problem?" She did not answer. She swallowed hard. Her gaze darted to the phone on her desk, then back to me, then over my shoulder to the security guard. "Just one moment," she stammered. "I need to get my supervisor." She stood up so fast her chair rolled back and hit the file cabinet with a loud bang. The entire waiting room turned to look. She didn't care. She turned and practically ran through the door behind her desk, leaving the window open. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs. What had I done? Had Darren reported me for fraud years ago? Was there a warrant out for my arrest because of some lie he told Panic? Cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I looked at the door. I should run. I should turn around and walk out before they came back, but my legs would not move. I was frozen. Staring at the empty chair and the computer screen I could not see. I had come here for help, for a few $100s to survive the month. I did not know that by writing those 9 digits, I had just unlocked a door that had been sealed shut for 29 years. I did not know that the woman was not running to get a supervisor to approve my food stamps. She was running because the computer had just told her that a ghost was standing at her window. The silence that followed Brenda's departure was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a submarine that has gone too deep. I stood at the window, my knuckles white as I gripped the counter ledge. I could feel the eyes of the people in the waiting room boring into my back. They were annoyed that the line had stopped. But I was terrified. The cursor on Brenda's computer screen blinked. It was a rhythmic, mocking pulse. On, off, on, off. It was the only thing moving in the entire world. I ran through the catalog of my life, searching for the crime. Had I filled out a tax form wrong 3 years ago? Had Darren taken out a credit card in my name and defaulted on it? That had to be it. He was an accountant. He knew how to manipulate numbers. He must have used my identity to bury some debt. And now, years later, the avalanche was finally hitting me. I was going to be arrested for fraud. I was going to jail because I had dared to ask for help. The door behind the counter opened again. It was not just Brenda. A man followed her out. He was wearing a cheap tie and a shirt that was straining at the buttons. He had the harried, sweaty look of a mid-level bureaucrat who had just been handed a stick of dynamite. This was the manager. I could tell by the plastic badge on his hip and the way Brenda deferred to him, shrinking behind his shoulder. But it was not the manager who scared me. It was the security guard. The guard, an older man who had been dozing by the entrance 5 minutes ago, was now standing 10 feet away from me. His hand was not on his weapon, but his posture had shifted from bored to alert. He was blocking the path to the exit. He was watching me the way you watch a stray dog that might bite. Ms. Green, the manager said. His voice was too loud in the quiet room. He winced, then lowered it. Ms. Green, if you could please come with us. I did not move. Why, I asked. My voice was steady, but my knees felt like water. Is there a problem with the application I can just leave? I do not need the assistance. I will just go. I took a step back, turning slightly toward the door. The guard took a step forward. It was a synchronized dance, a clear message. You are not leaving. We just need to clear up a discrepancy with your documentation, the manager said. He was sweating. A bead of perspiration rolled down his temple. Please, it is just a formality. Step into my office. It was not a request. I looked at the exit. It was 20 feet away. I could run. I was faster than the guard. But then what live as a fugitive, I was already living like a ghost. I tightened my grip on my purse, squared my shoulders, and nodded. Fine, I said. They led me through the door, past the rows of cubicles where other caseworkers had stopped typing to watch us pass. The silence was absolute. It felt like walking to an execution. The manager opened the door to a conference room at the back of the building. It was a windowless box with a gray table and 4 gray chairs. Please, sit, the manager said. I sat. The manager did not sit. He stood by the door, looking at his watch. Brenda was gone. It was just me and the hum of the ventilation system. Then the door opened again. The man who walked in was not a social worker. He was not a police officer. He was wearing a dark suit that looked expensive, cut sharp against his frame. He carried no briefcase, only a thin manila folder tucked under his arm. He had a face that gave nothing away, calm, professional, and terrifyingly alert. A badge hung from his belt, catching the fluorescent light. It was not a local police badge. He closed the door behind him. The manager stayed outside. I am Agent Rowan Pierce, he said. He did not offer his hand. He walked to the opposite side of the table and pulled out a chair. But he did not sit. He placed the folder on the table between us. It was closed. I know what this is, I said. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. My stepfather, Darren Kincaid. Whatever he did with my credit, whatever he signed my name to, I did not do it. I have not spoken to him in 12 years. I did not steal anything. Agent Pierce looked at me. His eyes were a pale, piercing gray. He studied my face with an intensity that made me want to crawl under the table. He was not looking at me like a suspect in a fraud case. He was looking at me like I was a puzzle he had been trying to solve for a very long time. This is not about fraud. Nora, he said. His voice was low, resonant. You are not under arrest. You are not in trouble. Then why is there a guard at the door? I challenged. Why is the manager sweating because of the flag on your social security number? He said. He tapped the folder. That number does not belong to a debtor. He continued. It is an interagency flag, a violent crime code, specifically, a kidnapping code. The air left the room. Kidnapping, I repeated. I stared at him. That is insane. I have never kidnapped anyone. He did not blink. I know you haven't. He pulled the chair out and finally sat down. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. I need you to answer some questions for me, Nora, and I need you to think very carefully before you speak. I nodded. Mute. Tell me about the hospital where you were born, he said. The question was so simple, so mundane, that my mind went blank. I opened my mouth to answer, to recite the story I had been told my whole life. Mercy General, outside of Chicago, but the words stuck in my throat. Had I ever seen a picture of it? Had my mother ever told me about the nurses, the room, the labor, Mercy General? I said, Have you ever seen your long-form birth certificate? He asked. Not the wallet card. The original document with the raised seal and the doctor's signature. I frowned. Darren kept the papers. He said it was safer in his safe. He gave me the copy when I left. A copy, Pierce repeated. Did that copy have a hospital name on it? I tried to visualize the paper I had carried around for 12 years. It was a standard state certification. It listed my name, my date of birth, and my mother's name. But the hospital, I realized with a jolt of cold fear that the field for place of birth Simply said, the county, Cook County. I do not know, I whispered. What is your earliest memory? Pierce asked. I was 5. I said quickly. We were moving into the house on Maple Street. I remember the moving truck. Anything before that, he pressed. A birthday party, a Christmas, a toy. I squeezed my eyes shut. I tried to reach back into the fog of my early childhood. I wanted to find something, anything, to prove him wrong. But there was nothing, just a gray wall. My life began at 5, in a moving truck with Darren and my mother. Before that, there was only a sense of motion, of being in a car for a long time. I do not have a good memory, I said defensively. Lots of people do not remember being babies. Most people have stories. Pierce said, parents tell them stories. You cried all night. You loved this teddy bear. You walked at 10 months. Did Beth Kincaid ever tell you stories about your infancy? I felt a phantom pain in my chest. No, my mother never talked about the past. If I asked, she would get a migraine and go to her room. Darren would tell me to stop pestering her. Why are you asking me this? I demanded. My voice rose, thin and cracking. What does this have to do with my social security number? Pierce placed his hand on the folder. The number you wrote down today triggered a silent alarm that went straight to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and simultaneously to my division at the FBI. That number was issued in 1988, but it was not issued to Nora Green. He flipped the folder open. The inside was red, bright, alarming red. Stamped across the top in black ink were the words, Cold Case. He slid a photograph across the table. It was an old photo, grainy and faded, clearly taken in the early 90s. It was a studio portrait of a baby. The baby was sitting on a white fur rug, looking straight at the camera with wide, startled eyes. The baby had a mop of unruly, dark curly hair. I looked at the photo, then I looked closer. The breath trapped in my lungs turned to ice. I knew those eyes. I saw them every morning in the cracked mirror of my bathroom. I knew that hairline, the way the curls kicked up on the left side. It was me. But it was not the me I knew. The baby in the photo was wearing a dress I had never seen, holding a rattle I did not recognize, and across the bottom of the photo, printed in bold type, was a date. Missing since October 14th. 1989. I felt the room tilt. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling out of the chair. This is a mistake, I whispered. I look like a lot of babies. All babies look the same. We ran a biometric progression on the structure of the facial bones. Pierce said. He slid another sheet of paper over. It showed the baby's face morphed and aged, year by year, until it became a face that was undeniably, terrifyingly mine. And that social security number, it belongs to the child in this picture. He leaned in closer. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and devastating. There is no birth record for a Nora Green in any state database. There are no school records for a Nora Green prior to 1994. You did not exist before you were 5 years old. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I have to go. I said. I felt the bile rising in my throat. I have to go. You are crazy. My mother is Beth Kincaid. I have a sister named Jade. I have a life. Sit down. Nora, Pierce said. He did not yell, but the command slammed into me like a physical weight. I did not sit. I backed away until my back hit the wall. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to make fists to stop them. You are not a suspect, Pierce said again. But you are the evidence. You are the answer to a question a family has been asking for 29 years. He stood up and picked up the photo. He held it out to me. Your mother did not lose you. Nora, you were taken. You were stolen from a park in Ohio while your mother turned around to throw away a coffee cup. You were 10 months old. Stop it, I yelled. I covered my ears. I did not want to hear it. If I heard it, it would make it real. And if it was real, then everything, every memory, every pain, every moment of my life was a lie. Pierce lowered the photo. He looked at me with profound pity. Your name is not Nora Green, he said. He took a breath, and then he said the name. Lila. The sound of it hit me like a physical blow. Lila Ray Sutter. The name did not sound like a stranger's name. It sounded like a melody I had forgotten, but suddenly remembered the instant the first note was played. It vibrated in my bones. It bypassed my brain and went straight to some primal, buried place in my gut. Lila. I slid down the wall. My legs simply gave up. I sat on the floor of the conference room, the gray carpet rough against my palms. I looked up at Agent Pierce, my vision swimming. "Lila Ray Sutter," he repeated softly, and in the silence that followed, I could hear it. I could hear a voice, sweet and distant, calling that name from across a vast, dark ocean of time, and for the first time in 29 years, I knew with a terrifying certainty that I was not alone. The floor of the conference room was hard and cold, but I barely felt it. I was floating in a space where gravity had ceased to exist, untethered by the revelation that had just shattered my understanding of who I was. Agent Rowan Pierce did not rush me. He did not pull me to my feet or call for a medic. He simply sat in the chair, watching me with that unnerving, patient gray gaze, waiting for the words to sink in. Lila Ray Sutter. I said the name out loud. It tasted foreign on my tongue, like a word from a language I had never studied. "That is not me," I said. I started to laugh. It was a jagged, ugly sound that scraped against my throat. "This is ridiculous. I am not some missing heiress. I am not a tragedy from the nightly news. I am Nora Green. I work in a warehouse. I have a scar on my knee from falling off a bike when I was 7. The scar is real." Pierce said calmly, "The bike happened, but the name Nora Green, that is a ghost story." He opened the folder wider, spreading documents across the table like a dealer laying out a winning hand of cards. "Your social security number was flagged by the National Crime Information Center," he explained. "It was entered into the system 29 years ago by the parents of a 10-month-old baby girl who vanished from a stroller in a park in Ohio. That number has been dormant for nearly 3 decades. It was a digital landmine, waiting for someone to step on it. Today, you stepped on it." I looked at the papers. They were covered in official stamps, dates, and police codes. Missing person report, Octave 14, 1989. I stood up, my legs trembling. "You are telling me I was kidnapped?" I asked, my voice rising. "That my mother, that Beth stole me?" Pierce looked at his phone, which had just buzzed on the table. He read the screen, and his expression hardened. "We checked the vital statistics in every state. Nora, there is no birth certificate for a Nora Green born on your alleged birthday. There is no hospital record, no footprint, no vaccination chart prior to age 5. Legally, Nora Green does not exist. You are a fabrication, a fiction created to hide a stolen child." I shook my head violently. "No, she is weak. She is scared of her own shadow. She could not pull off a kidnapping. She lets Darren walk all over her. She does not have the spine for this." Pierce stood up. He walked over to me, not too close, respecting the invisible electric fence of my panic. "People do extraordinary things when they are desperate," he said, "and fear is a powerful motivator. You said she told you to run. She told you, don't let them find you. She was not protecting you from Darren. Nora. She was protecting herself from us." He held up the phone he had just checked, and she knew the clock was ticking. He added, "We located Beth Kincaid 10 minutes ago." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Where is she at the house?" "She was at the Greyhound station in downtown." Pierce said, "She had a ticket to Mexico and $3,000 in cash sewn into the lining of her coat. She was running." Nora, innocent people do not run the moment their daughter applies for state aid. The image of my mother, my sad, quiet, downtrodden mother sewing cash into a coat and boarding a bus to a foreign country was so jarring it made me dizzy. It was like hearing that a house cat had taken down a gazelle. "I want to see her," I said. The demand came out before I thought about it. "We are bringing her in now," Pierce said. "She is being transported to the federal building. I am taking you there." The ride to the federal building was a blur of gray highway and muted radio chatter. I sat in the back of Pierce's sedan, staring out the window but seeing nothing. My mind was a kaleidoscope of memories. fracturing and rearranging themselves. You are not my blood. Darren's voice echoed in my head. I had always thought it was an insult, a way to demean me. Now, I realized with a sick lurch of my stomach, it was the only honest thing he had ever said to me. He knew. He had known the whole time. That was why I was the outcast. That was why I was fed leftovers. That was why he had kicked me out at 18. It wasn't just cruelty. It was risk management. I was incriminating evidence that ate too much. We arrived at the building. It was a fortress of glass and steel. Pierce led me through a back entrance, bypassing the metal detectors and the curious eyes of the public. We took an elevator down. Not up. The air grew cooler as we descended. We walked down a long corridor lined with heavy metal doors. The lighting was stark, clinical. It smelled of floor wax and old coffee. Pierce stopped in front of a door marked Interview 2. "She is in there," he said. He turned to me, his hand on the doorknob. "You do not have to do this. We can get a statement from her without you. I have to." I said, "I need to hear her say it." Pierce nodded. He opened the door. The room was small, soundproofed with acoustic tiles. There was a metal table bolted to the floor. Sitting at the table, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, was Beth. She was wearing her old beige coat, the one I remembered from my childhood. Her hands were on the table, wrists bound together by shiny steel handcuffs. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her hair was a mess of tangled gray. When I stepped inside, her head snapped up. "Nora," she gasped. The sound of her voice, so familiar and yet now so alien, sent a shockwave through me. I stood by the door, my back pressed against the frame. Pierce stayed in the hallway, but he left the door slightly ajar. Beth scrambled to stand up, but the chain of the handcuffs caught on the table leg, jerking her back down. She began to weep, deep, heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. "Oh, thank God," she choked out. "Thank God you are okay. I was so worried. When the police came, I thought something happened to you." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had put Band-Aids on my knees, who had taught me to tie my shoes, who had stood by while Darren treated me like a parasite. "Sit down," I said. My voice was cold. It did not sound like my voice. It sounded like Darren's. Beth froze. She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Honey, do not call me that," I snapped. The anger flared up, hot and bright. "Do not call me honey. Do not call me Nora." She flinched as if I had slapped her. She sank back into the chair, curling in on herself. "You were running," I said. I walked closer to the table. I needed to see her eyes. I needed to see the truth. "You were at the bus station. You were leaving. I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of what I asked. Scared that I would find out. Scared that the police would realize you have been lying every day for 29 years. She looked down at her cuffed hands. "I was scared for you," she said softly. "Do not lie to me," I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and violent. It echoed off the acoustic tiles. "Stop lying. Agent Pierce told me everything. The social security number, the missing child report, the photo." I slammed my hand down on the table. Beth jumped. "Who am I?" I demanded. "Tell me who I am." Beth began to shake. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking out from the corners. "You are my daughter," she sobbed. "In my heart. You are my daughter. Facts." "Beth." I yelled. "I want facts. Am I Lila Ray?" "Sutter?" She did not answer. She just cried harder, rocking back and forth. "Answer me. Yes," she wailed. "Yes, you are Lila." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. It was the final nail in the coffin of Nora Green. I felt a strange sensation in my chest, like a rib had cracked. Why, I whispered. The anger drained away, leaving only a hollow, aching void. "Why did you do it? How could you steal a baby?" Beth took a shuddering breath. She wiped her nose on her shoulder because her hands were bound. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw a deep, ancient pain. I lost her. She whispered what I asked. My baby. She said, my real baby. I was pregnant. It was a girl. We were going to name her Sarah. She stared past me, looking at a ghost in the corner of the room. I was 8 months along. She continued, her voice flat and monotone. There was a complication. The cord it was wrapped. By the time I got to the hospital, she was gone. Stillborn. She looked back at me. Darren, he was so angry. He blamed me. He said my body was broken. He said I was useless if I could not give him a family. He told me if I came home without a baby, I should not come home at all. I listened, horrified. I knew Darren was cruel, but this was a monstrous depth I had not imagined. I had a breakdown. Beth said, they put me in the psych ward for a week. When I got out, I was empty. I was just a shell. I walked around for days. I did not go home. I drove. I just drove. And then I prompted. I ended up in Ohio. She said, I do not even remember driving there. I was at a park. I was sitting on a bench, watching the mothers, watching the strollers. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. You were there, she said. You were in a stroller. Your mother, the woman she turned around to throw something in the trash. She was talking to another lady. You were crying. You were crying so loud, and nobody was picking you up. I felt a chill run down my spine. I just wanted to comfort you. Beth said, I walked over. I picked you up. You stopped crying the second I held you. You looked at me. You had these big, blue eyes, and you felt so warm. You felt like mine. So you took me. I said, I did not think. She whispered, I just walked. I walked to the car. I put you in the seat, and I drove. I thought I was saving you. I thought I was saving myself. And Darren, I asked, when did he know? He knew immediately. She said. She let out a bitter, wet laugh. I came home with a 10-month-old baby when I was supposed to have a newborn. He knew. But he let you keep me. I said, he saw an opportunity. Beth said, we moved. He forged the papers. He set up the new identities. He told everyone we adopted you. But inside the house, he made sure I knew that I was a criminal. And he made sure you knew that you were not his. I stared at her. The pieces were falling into place with a sickening click. Darren had used her crime as leverage. He had held it over her head for decades. And he had used my status as a stolen child to dehumanize me, to keep me submissive, to keep me from asking questions that might expose them. He kept me terrified so I would never look at my own paperwork. I realized aloud, that is why he kicked me out. Not because he hated me, but because an 18-year-old needs a driver's license, a job, a college application. He needed me gone before the system flagged me. Beth nodded miserably. He wanted you to disappear. He said if you stayed, we would both go to jail. He made me sign that paper. He made me watch you walk away, and you let him. I said. My voice was quiet again. You stole me from a family that loved me. You erased my life. And then, when it got inconvenient, you threw me away like garbage. I loved you. Beth sobbed. I loved you every day. That is not love, I said. I stepped back from the table. Love is not stealing. Love is not lying. Love is not letting a monster like Darren treat a child like an unwanted tenant in her own home. I turned toward the door. I could not look at her anymore. The sight of her weeping face, once the only source of comfort I had, now made me sick. Rowan Pierce was standing in the doorway. He looked at me, then at Beth. Wait, Beth cried out. She struggled against the cuffs. Nora, please don't leave me here. They are going to put me in prison. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I did not turn around. My name is not Nora. I said. I walked out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off her wails. The silence of the corridor rushed back in, but it was different now. It was not the silence of being alone. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. Agent Pierce fell into step beside me. Are you all right? He asked. No. I said. I felt hollowed out. Scraped clean. But I am ready for the next part. What part is that? He asked. The truth. I said. She told me the story of how she took me. Now I need to know the story of the people she took me from. Pierce nodded. He pulled his phone out again. They are on their way, he said. The Sutters. Your parents. They have been waiting for this phone call for 29 years. They are flying in tonight. I leaned against the cold concrete wall of the hallway. I closed my eyes. Somewhere, on a plane cutting through the dark sky, were two people who had mourned me before I could even walk. Two people whose lives had been stopped the day mine was restarted. I was terrified to meet them. I was terrified that I would not be the daughter they dreamed of. I was terrified that the damage Darren and Beth had done was too deep to fix. But as I stood there, listening to the hum of the federal building, I realized something else. For the first time in my life, I was not just drifting, I was waiting, and someone was coming for me. I had walked into the hallway, but I could not keep walking. The heavy metal door had clicked shut, sealing Beth Kincaid and her weeping confession inside. But the silence it left behind was not peaceful. It was unfinished. I stood there, staring at the scuff marks on the linoleum floor, and realized that while I knew how I had been taken, I did not understand why I had been kept. Kidnapping a child is a crime of passion or desperation, but keeping a child for 29 years, that is a logistical feat. That requires calculation. Beth was a woman who crumbled under the weight of a grocery bill. She did not have the spine to orchestrate a 3-decade deception on her own. I turned around. Agent Pierce was watching me, his hand halfway to his pocket, likely reaching for his phone to call the team handling the Sutters. I am not done, I said. He studied my face, looking for signs of hysteria, but he found none. I was not hysterical. I was cold. I was operating on the same icy frequency that had helped me survive 12 years of poverty. Do you want me to come in with you? He asked. No, I said. I need her to look at me, not you. I pushed the door open. Beth had not moved. She was still slumped over the table, her face buried in her cuffed hands. When the latch clicked, she jerked upright, hope flashing across her swollen eyes. She thought I had come back to forgive her. She thought I had come back to be Nora again. I pulled the chair out and sat down. The metal legs scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made her flinch. I need to talk about Darren, I said. Beth's face fell. The hope evaporated, replaced by a fresh wave of terror. She looked at the two-way mirror, then back at me. He had nothing to do with taking you, she stammered. It was me. It was all me. Stop protecting him, I said. My voice was low and hard. You said you took me because you were grieving. You said you were wandering around, out of your mind. Fine. I believe that part. You were sick. But Darren is not sick. Darren is an accountant. Darren is a man who measures the world in assets and liabilities. I leaned forward. Why did he let you keep me? Beth looked down at her hands. Her fingers were twisting together, turning white at the knuckles. He wanted a family, she whispered. He was obsessed with the image of it. When we got married, that was the deal. I had to give him children. He wanted a son, but he said he would settle for a daughter first. He wanted to look like a man who had everything. She swallowed hard. When I lost Sarah, when the doctor said there were complications and I might not be able to carry another baby to term, Darren changed. He did not comfort me. He looked at me like I was a broken appliance. He told me I had failed him. He said a house without children was just a building, and he did not pay a mortgage for a building. I felt a phantom chill. This sounded exactly like the man I knew, the man who saw people as functions, not souls. So you brought home a stolen baby, I said, and he just accepted it. Beth closed her eyes. I drove back from Ohio in a panic. She said, I had you in the back seat. You were sleeping. I was terrified. I thought about leaving you at a church or a police station, but I was so selfish. You were so warm, and I knew if I went home empty-handed, Darren would leave me. I knew it, so I pulled into the driveway. She paused, her breath hitching. He was in the garage. He saw the car. He saw the baby seat. He came over and looked at you. You woke up and smiled at him. I was shaking. I was waiting for him to scream, to call the police. I told him, I found her. I found her. And I pressed. He looked at you for a long time, Beth said. Then he looked at the street to make sure no neighbors were watching. He closed the garage door. He turned to me and said, "She will do. She will do." The phrase hung in the air. Sickeningly practical. I was not a child to him. I was a prop. I was a piece of furniture he needed to complete the staging of his perfect suburban life. He took over from there. Beth continued. Her voice was stronger now, fueled by the memory of his dominance. He told me to stop crying. He said panic gets people caught. He went into his office and locked the door. He spent 3 days in there. When he came out, he had papers, a birth certificate from a county 3 hours away, a fabricated history. He told everyone we had adopted a baby from a distant cousin who had died in a car wreck. That was the story. Tragic accident, distant relative. People do not ask questions about tragedy. It makes them uncomfortable. I stared at her. The efficiency of it was terrifying. He named you, she said. I wanted to call you Sarah. After the baby we lost. He said no. He said Sarah was dead. He picked Nora. He said it sounded plain, unremarkable. He did not want a name that stood out. I sat back in the chair, processing the cruelty of it. But there was still a piece missing, if I was the prop he wanted. I said, then why did he treat me like garbage? Why the separate food? Why the constant reminders that I wasn't his blood? If the goal was to play happy family, why did he make me feel like an intruder? Beth looked up at me, and her expression was one of pity. Because that was the lock. Nora. She said, what? The cruelty. She explained. It was the lock on the cage. I did not understand. She saw my confusion and leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Darren knew that eventually. You would grow up. You would have eyes. You would have a brain. If we treated you like a princess, if we loved you and gave you everything, you would feel entitled. You would feel secure. And secure children ask questions. Secure children want to see their birth certificates. They want to know about their medical history. They want to know where they came from. She paused, letting the words sink in. But a child who feels lucky just to be allowed inside the house. A child who is told every day that she is a burden, that she does not belong, that child does not ask for papers, that child does not demand to see a passport. That child keeps her head down and tries to be invisible so she does not get kicked out. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It knocked the wind out of me. All those years, the cold stares, the withheld food, the mantra, "You are not my blood." It was not just sadism, it was strategy. He engineered my low self-esteem. He carefully constructed my sense of worthlessness because it was the only way to keep me from discovering that I was a stolen commodity. If I believed I was nothing, I would never look for the truth of who I was. He made me small so I would fit in the box he built. I whispered. Beth nodded. He was terrified you would remember, especially in the beginning. He watched you like a hawk. Every time you cried, he thought you were remembering your real mother, so he pushed you away. He made you afraid of him. Fear is a great distraction. If you are afraid of the man at the head of the table, you are not thinking about the fuzzy memories of the life you had before, and the eviction. I said, my 18th birthday, the 2 suitcases, risk management. Beth said, 18 is the age of adulthood. It is the age of background checks, college applications, loan documents. If you stayed in the house, his taxes, his insurance, everything would be exposed to scrutiny. He needed you off his books. He needed you gone before you became a paperwork liability. He threw me out to save himself. I said, he saved us both, she corrected, though her voice wavered. He told me it was the only way. He said, we gave her 18 years. That is more than she deserved. Now she goes. Or we go to prison. I looked at the woman sitting across from me. For years, I had pitied her. I had thought she was a victim of his bullying just like I was. I thought her silence was fear, but now I saw it for what it truly was. complicity. She had traded my life for her security. She had watched him dismantle my spirit brick by brick, and she had said nothing because it kept her secret safe. "One last question," I said. Beth waited. "Do you love me?" The question hung in the stale air of the interrogation room. Beth's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled over her cheeks. "Yes," she sobbed. "Oh God. Nora, yes, I love you more than anything. You are my daughter. I raised you. I took care of you. I stop," I said. I stood up. I did not yell. I did not slam the table. I just felt a sudden, profound exhaustion. "You do not love me. Beth, you love the idea that you were a mother. You love the fact that I filled a hole in your life, but you never loved me. If you loved me, you would have taken me to a police station the day you took me. If you loved me, you would have stood up to Darren when he denied me food. If you loved me, you would not have let me sleep in a car when I was 18 years old. I loved you the best way I knew how." She pleaded. "Then your love is toxic," I said, "and I do not want it." I walked to the door. This time, I did not hesitate. I put my hand on the latch. Nora Beth screamed. The desperation in her voice was shrill, piercing. "Please do not leave me here. They are going to charge me. I am old. I cannot go to prison. I did it for you. I gave you a home." I opened the door. Agent Pierce was standing there, his face unreadable, but his posture protective. He looked at Beth, then at me. I turned back to her one last time. "You did not give me a home," I said. "You gave me a hiding place." "Please," she wailed, struggling to stand, the cuffs clattering against the metal table. "Don't abandon me. You are all I have." I looked at her, at the woman who had stolen 29 years of my history, and felt nothing, no hate, no pity, just a vast, empty space where a mother should have been. "You abandoned me a long time ago." I said, "You abandoned me the day you decided your grief was more important than my life." I stepped out into the hallway and let the door close. The heavy click of the latch cut off her screams instantly. The silence returned. But this time, it was not heavy. It was clean. It felt like the air after a thunderstorm, sharp, clear, and new. Agent Pierce looked at me. He did not offer empty platitudes. He did not tell me I was brave. He simply checked his watch and looked down the corridor toward the elevators. "We need to go upstairs," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Because they are here," he said. My heart skipped a beat. "Who the Sutters?" he said. "Marianne and Graham. They landed 40 minutes ago. We brought them to a private waiting area on the 4th floor." I felt a wave of panic, sudden and overwhelming. I looked down at my clothes, my worn-out jeans, my cheap work boots, the flannel shirt that had a small stain on the cuff. I looked at my hands, rough and calloused from years of lifting boxes. "I cannot meet them," I said. "Look at me. I am a mess. I am broken. Agent Pierce, they are expecting the baby they lost. They are expecting a daughter. I am just Nora." Pierce turned to face me fully. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a firm, grounding weight. "They are not expecting a baby. Nora, they are expecting a survivor. And looking at you, I think that is exactly what they are going to get." He gestured toward the elevator. "Are you ready to meet the people who have been looking for you since 1989? I took a deep breath. I thought about the car I had slept in. I thought about the warehouse. I thought about the way I had trained myself to take up as little space as possible. And then I thought about the name, Lila. "I am ready," I said. We walked toward the elevator. As the doors slid open, I realized I was not just walking away from Beth and Darren. I was walking toward a door I had been standing in front of my entire life, waiting for someone to unlock it. The doors closed, and we began to rise. The waiting room on the 4th floor was not like the ones in the movies. There were no balloons, no banners welcoming me home, and no news crews jockeying for a view of the tearful reunion. It was just a small, windowless space with beige walls and 4 chairs arranged in a circle, illuminated by the same clinical fluorescent lights that hummed throughout the rest of the federal building. The air conditioner blasted a frigid stream of air directly onto my neck. but I was sweating. I sat on one of the chairs, my hands gripped tightly around my knees. I looked down at my knuckles, which were white and trembling. I felt like an imposter. I felt like a fraud who had somehow tricked the United States government and was about to trick a grieving family. Despite the biometric scans, despite the photo of the baby with my eyes, and despite Beth's confession downstairs, a voice in my head kept screaming that this was a mistake. I was Nora Green. I was the girl who worked in a warehouse and ate instant noodles. I was not Lila Ray Sutter. I was not the lost princess of some tragedy. Agent Pierce stood by the door. He had offered me water, which I declined, and coffee, which I knew I would just spill. He was giving me space, but he was also guarding the perimeter. He knew I had a flight instinct. He knew that for the last 12 years, my solution to any problem had been to pack a bag and disappear. "They are just outside," Pierce said softly. "Whenever you are ready, I am not ready," I said. My voice sounded small in the quiet room. What if they look at me and they do not see her? What if they see the damage? What if they see Darren's daughter? They are not looking for perfection. "Nora," he said, "they are looking for proof of life." I took a deep breath. It rattled in my chest. I nodded. "Open the door," I said. Pierce opened the door. The first person to walk in was a woman. She was petite, with silver hair cut in a short, practical bob. She was wearing a simple blue sweater and slacks, clutching a handbag against her stomach as if it contained the only oxygen in the room. This was Marianne Sutter. She stopped 3 feet inside the door. She did not rush. She did not scream. She just looked at me. Her eyes were blue, my blue. They were framed by deep lines, the kind of lines that are not etched by laughter, but by decades of staring out windows, waiting for a car that never pulls into the driveway. She looked exhausted, not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual one. She looked like a woman who had been treading water for 29 years and was finally touching the bottom. Behind her came a man. Graham Sutter was tall, his shoulders slightly stooped, wearing a jacket that looked a size too big for him. He had a kind face, weathered and gray, with eyes that held a permanent, startled sorrow. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. I did not know what to do with my hands. I did not know how to stand. I wanted to apologize for being alive, for being late, for being a stranger. Lila. It was Marianne. She whispered the name. It was not a question. It was a prayer. Lila. The sound of it hit me harder than any blow Darren had ever landed. It was a sound that belonged to me, yet I had no memory of owning it. It was like hearing a song you heard in the womb. It vibrated in my teeth. It made the hair on my arms stand up. It was terrifying. It was the sound of a door unlocking. A door I had been told was painted on a wall. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was closed tight. I nodded, a jerky, spasmodic motion. Marianne took a step forward, then another. She moved as if she were approaching a wild animal that might bolt if she made a sudden movement. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling, and touched my arm. "It is you," she breathed. She wasn't looking at my clothes or my boots. She was looking at the scar on my chin, the one I got when I was 3. She was looking at the way my hairline kicked up on the left. Graham stepped up beside her. He did not touch me. He just stared, tears spilling silently over his cheeks, tracking through the stubble on his jaw. He looked at me with a hunger that was almost frightening. It was the hunger of a man who has been starving for a lifetime. I started, my voice cracking. "I have to tell you something." They waited. Marianne's hand was still on my arm, warm and anchoring. "I do not remember you," I said. The confession felt like a betrayal. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say I remembered the nursery, the lullabies, the smell of her perfume, but I could not start this new life with a lie. "I don't remember anything before I was 5. I am sorry. I expected them to be crushed. I expected them to pull away. Instead..." Marianne nodded. A sad, knowing smile touched her lips. "We know," she said softly. We spoke to the doctors. They said trauma hides things. They said time erases things. It does not matter. Lila, it does not matter what you remember. Graham spoke then. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel. We remember, he said. We remember enough for all of us. He reached out then and took my hand. His grip was strong, calloused, real. It was not the cold, possessive grip of Darren. It was a grip that said, I have got you. I am not letting go. The door opened again, and a younger man walked in. He looked to be about 32 or 33. He had the same dark hair as me, the same nose. This was Owen, my brother. He stopped next to Graham. He was looking at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had grown up in the shadow of a missing child. He had been the one who stayed, the one who had to blow out the candles on the cake for the sister who wasn't there. He had lived in a house that was a shrine to a ghost. Hi, he said. It was awkward. It was perfect. Hi, I said. You look like the age progression photo, he said, a nervous laugh escaping him. I mean, exactly like it. It is creepy. Owen, Marianne chided gently, but she was smiling through her tears. Owen stepped forward and did what neither of his parents had dared to do yet. He pulled me into a hug. It was clumsy. I went stiff at first, my muscles locking up from years of conditioning that said touch was dangerous. Touch was a prelude to pain or debt. But Owen did not let go. He squeezed tighter. I always wanted to know if you were taller than me. He mumbled into my shoulder. You are not. I win. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The tension in my chest broke. A sob ripped its way out of my throat, violent and sudden. I buried my face in his jacket. He smelled of rain and cedar, and I cried. I cried for the girl who had sat alone in the school cafeteria. I cried for the teenager who had signed herself out of her own home. I cried for the woman who slept in a car behind a laundromat. But mostly, I cried because for the first time in 29 years, I was in a room where I was not just tolerated. I was wanted. The weight of that want was crushing. It was heavier than the rejection had ever been. Rejection is easy. You just harden yourself against it. But being wanted, that requires you to open up. That requires you to be soft. And being soft is terrifying. Marianne and Graham joined the hug. We stood there in the center of that sterile government room, a four-headed knot of grief and relief. I felt Marianne's tears soaking through my shirt. I felt Graham's hand on the back of my head, protecting me from a danger that was no longer there. Eventually, we pulled apart. Agent Pierce cleared his throat from the corner. He had a small kit on the table. I hate to interrupt, he said gently, but we need to formalize this. We need the DNA sample to close the case legally. The fear spiked again. I looked at the swab in his hand. What if it is wrong? I whispered. I looked at Marianne. What if the computer made a mistake? What if I am just a stranger who looks like her? Marianne took my face in her hands. Her palms were soft. You are not a stranger, she said fiercely. I carried you. I know you. My heart knows you. But the science, I stammered. Let's do the science, Graham said firmly. Let's put it on paper so nobody can ever question it again. I walked to the table. I sat down. Pierce opened the sterile packet. I opened my mouth. He swabbed the inside of my cheek. It took 10 seconds. 10 seconds to bridge 29 years. He sealed the tube. We will have the rush results in 48 hours, Pierce said. But given the biometric match and the confession from Mrs. Kincaid downstairs, there is zero doubt in my mind. He looked at me. Nora Lila, you call the shots here. You decide where you go tonight. You decide how fast this goes. If you need a hotel, we have one arranged. If you want to go with them, you can. Nobody's going to force you to do anything. You have the control now. I looked at the Sutters. They were watching me with that same terrified hope. They wanted me to come with them. I could see it in their eyes. They wanted to take me to a home I didn't remember, to a room that probably still had dust motes from 1989 floating in the sunlight. But I was overwhelmed. My skin felt too tight for my body. I think I need a minute, I said. Of course, Marianne said immediately. She stepped back, giving me space. Take all the time you need. We are not going anywhere. We are staying right here in the city until you are ready. We booked rooms at the Marriott down the street. Owen said, we can get you a room on the same floor, or a different floor, or a different hotel, whatever you want. Same floor, I said. The words came out before I could overthink them. They smiled. It was a tentative, fragile thing, but it was real. Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He took out a small, folded piece of paper and handed it to me. I wrote this down the day you disappeared, he said. I have carried it every day since. It is the address of the house, our house, your house, just in case you ever forgot. I took the paper. It was soft from years of being touched. I unfolded it. 1214 Oak Creek Lane, Columbus, Ohio. I stared at the handwriting. It was shaky, written in panic, but preserved with love. Thank you, I whispered. I realized then that home was not a place. Darren's house had been a structure, a building with walls and a roof, but it had never been a home. Home was not about architecture. Home was the place where people did not look at you like you were a debt to be paid. Home was the place where you were allowed to exist without apologizing for the space you took up. I looked at Marianne, Graham, and Owen. They were strangers. Yes, but they were strangers who had kept a light on for me when the rest of the world had told them to turn it off. I am going to the restroom, I said. I just need to wash my face. Then we can go to the hotel. Marianne nodded. She looked like she wanted to hug me again, but restrained herself. Take your time. Lila. I walked out of the room, past Agent Pierce, and down the hall to the ladies' room. I pushed the door open and leaned over the sink. I splashed cold water on my face, gasping as the shock of it hit my skin. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face looking back was the same, but the eyes were different. They were not the eyes of Nora Green, the invisible girl. They were the eyes of Lila Ray Sutter, the girl who had been found. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. My hands wet. I expected a spam call or maybe a notification from the weather app. It was a text from Jade. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the message. I clicked it open. Nora, you need to know. Darren is acting crazy. He is selling everything. The boat, the second car, the stocks. He is liquidating the accounts. He is packing bags, not suitcases, duffel bags. He has a gun on the table. I think he is going to run. Please be careful. The warmth of the reunion in the other room evaporated instantly. The cold dread that had lived in my gut for 12 years came rushing back, freezing the water on my face. Darren was not just an accountant. He was a calculator. And he had realized that the equation had shifted. He knew Beth was gone. He knew I had triggered the flag. He was cashing out. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. He was running. He was going to take the money he had likely saved by starving me, money he had made by using my stolen identity as a tax shield, and he was going to disappear. He was going to live on a beach somewhere while Beth went to prison, and I spent the rest of my life in therapy. No. I looked at my reflection again. The fear was there, yes. But something else was rising up behind it, something hot and sharp. He had stolen my childhood. He had stolen my name. He had stolen my mother's sanity and my parents' peace. He was not going to get to steal a retirement fund and walk away. I wiped my face with a paper towel. I did not go back to the waiting room to hug my new parents. I walked out into the hall and marched straight up to Agent Pierce. He looked up from his file, surprised by the look on my face. Everything okay? He asked. No, I said. I held up the phone. Darren Kincaid is liquidating his assets. I said, he is packing to run. Pierce's eyes narrowed. He took the phone from my hand and read the text. His demeanor shifted instantly from compassionate social worker to federal agent. We need to move, he said. I looked at the closed door where the Sutters were waiting. I wanted to go in there. I wanted to sit with them and ask them what my favorite color was when I was a baby. I wanted to be Lila. But Lila could wait. Right now, I needed to be Nora. I needed to be the girl who had learned to survive in the dark. The girl who knew how Darren Kincaid thought. Do not let him leave, I said. Pierce was already dialing a number on his own phone. We won't, he said. I looked at the door one last time. Tell them I will be back, I said. Tell them I have to finish this. Finish what Pierce asked. Pausing with the phone to his ear, I looked him dead in the eye. I'm going to get my life back. I said, every single cent of it. The safe house was actually a suite at the Marriott, paid for by the federal government, but it felt like a quarantine zone. The sheets were too white, the air was too still, and the silence was heavy with the things we were all trying not to say. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at the room service menu as if it were a bomb schematic. My phone buzzed. It was Marianne. Lila, are you hungry? We ordered pasta. Graham says you look thin. Do you want us to bring a plate down? Or we can just leave it at the door. No pressure. I read the text 3 times. A lump formed in my throat. Hard and painful. It was such a simple question. Are you hungry? In Darren's house, hunger was a constant state of being, a leverage tool he used to negotiate my compliance. If I was good, I ate. If I was invisible, I ate. If I was inconvenient, the kitchen was closed. Now, here was a woman who had not seen me in 29 years, terrified that I might miss a single meal. It made me want to cry. But it also made me want to bolt. The kindness felt heavy. It felt like a debt I could never repay. I did not know how to be a daughter who was cherished. I only knew how to be a tenant who was tolerated. I typed back, I am okay. Thank you. I was not okay. I was starving. But my stomach was tied in such a tight knot that I knew I would just throw it up. A soft knock came at the door. I flinched. It was not room service. It was Graham. He stood in the hallway holding a plastic bin. It was an old Rubbermaid container, cracked at the corners, filled to the brim with paper. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. I wanted you to see this, he said. He did not come in. He just held the bin out. I did not want you to think we just moved on. I took the bin. It was heavy. He nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the elevators, giving me the space I clearly needed. I carried the bin to the bed and popped the lid. The smell of old paper and dust rose up, a scent that was strangely comforting. I reached in and pulled out the first item. It was a map of Ohio. It was so worn that the folds had turned to white fuzz. It was covered in red ink. Circles, X's, arrows, dates. October 15th, check the park perimeter. October 16th, check the storm drains. November 1st, tip from a trucker, false lead. I pulled out a notebook. It was a spiral-bound ledger, the kind kids use for math class. Every line was filled with Graham's handwriting. It was a log of every phone call he had made for the first 5 years. Police departments in 3 states, private investigators, psychics, hospitals. I picked up a flyer. Missing. Have you seen this child? My baby face stared back at me, photocopied into high-contrast black and white. I sat there for an hour, going through the archaeology of their grief. They had not just mourned me, they had hunted for me, while I was sitting in Darren's kitchen eating cold toast, believing I was unwanted trash. Graham Sutter was wading through swamps and harassing FBI agents, refusing to let the world forget the name Lila Ray Sutter. I was not a discard. I was the center of their universe, and I had never known it. The vibration of my phone snapped me out of the trance. It was not Marianne this time. It was Jade. I am outside. Rear parking lot. Blue Honda. Hurry. The transition from the warm, tragic past to the cold, dangerous present was jarring. I shoved the papers back into the bin and grabbed my coat. I told the agent stationed in the hallway that I needed fresh air. He tried to follow, but I told him I just needed 5 minutes alone in the parking lot to smoke. I did not smoke, but it was an excuse men usually respected. The night air was biting. I found the blue Honda tucked in the back corner, near the dumpster. Jade was behind the wheel, wearing a hoodie pulled low over her face. I opened the passenger door and slid in. The car smelled of fast food and fear. Jade looked at me. She looked terrible. Her eyes were shadowed, and her lip was chewed raw. "You look like her," she whispered. "The baby in the photo. I am her," I said. Jade gripped the steering wheel. "I am sorry. Nora. I mean Lila. I am so sorry. I did not know. I swear to God. I thought you were just... I thought Mom had an affair or something. I never thought focus. Jade. I cut her off. I did not have the energy to soothe her guilt. Tell me about Darren. She took a shaky breath. He is clearing the house, she said. He hired a service to shred documents. A truck came this morning. He is burning things in the backyard fire pit. He thinks I am at school, but I skipped. I watched him from the neighbor's yard. What is he selling? I asked. Everything liquid, she said. He cashed out his retirement accounts yesterday. He paid the penalty fees just to get the money instantly. He sold the boat to a guy on Craigslist for half its value, cash only, and he is transferring the titles of the cars. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I found this in the trash before he burned it, she said. It is a receipt from a storage unit in Nevada. He paid it up for 10 years. Cash. I took the paper. The date was from 2 days ago, but that is not the worst part, Jade said. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a horrific realization. I heard him on the phone. He was talking to his lawyer, or maybe his broker. He was angry. He was shouting. What did he say? I asked. He said, I am not losing the asset. That file brought in steady income for 15 years. If the girl talks, I lose the leverage. The air in the car seemed to drop 20 degrees. The file. I repeated, income. Jade nodded. He wasn't talking about you like a person, Nora. He was talking about you like an investment property that had just caught fire. I looked out the window at the dark parking lot. The pieces that had been floating in my mind suddenly slammed together into a picture so ugly I wanted to vomit. Go home, Jade, I said. Pack a bag. Go stay with your aunt. Do not let him know you talked to me. But what about Mom? She asked, tears spilling over. Mom is in federal custody. I said, she is safer there than she is with him. Go. I got out of the car and watched her drive away. Then I turned and walked back into the hotel. I did not go to my room. I went straight to Agent Pierce's suite 2 doors down. He opened the door in his shirt sleeves, a holster still clipped to his belt. He took one look at my face and stepped aside. What happened? He asked. I sat down at the small desk in the corner. I placed the crumpled receipt Jade had given me on the wood surface. Follow the money, I said. Pierce picked up the receipt. Nevada Darren is not just running. I said, he is closing a business. My sister heard him say that my file brought in income for 15 years. Pierce frowned. Income. How does a man make money off a kidnapped stepdaughter he keeps in the basement? He wasn't collecting ransom. Think like an accountant. I said. My brain was firing on all cylinders now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, mathematical rage. How do you make money off a person who doesn't legally exist? Pierce rubbed his chin. You claim them as a dependent on taxes. That is peanuts. I said, Darren is greedy. He wouldn't risk federal prison for a $2,000 tax credit. No, it has to be more. I stood up and paced the small room. He kept me off the grid. I said, no doctors, no school photos, no paper trail. He told me it was because I was not his blood. He told Beth it was to hide the kidnapping. But what if it was to hide the fraud? I stopped. He made me sign a paper when I was 18. I said, a voluntary departure agreement. He said it was to protect his assets. But what if it was a waiver? What if he needed my signature to release a trust or a fund? Pierce was already typing on his laptop. I am pulling his full financials, he said. Not just the surface tax returns. I am going deep. We are looking at shell companies, charitable trusts, offshore holdings. He hit a key and looked up at me. If he was monetizing your existence, Nora, this changes everything. This goes from kidnapping to human trafficking. It goes from a state crime to a federal RICO case. Dig. I said, find it, while Pierce worked. I went back to my room. The bin of memories was still on the bed. I needed to ground myself. I needed to remember that I was fighting for Lila, not just fighting against Darren. I picked up the bin again. At the bottom, under the maps and the flyers, was a small cassette tape. It was labeled Lila's Lullabies, 1989. There was an old cassette player on the nightstand. Graham must have brought it. I put the tape in and pressed play. The sound was hiss and crackle at first. Then, a woman's voice cut through. It was young, bright, and full of laughter. Marianne. Okay, Lila, listen to Mommy. Sing with me. And then she began to hum. It was a simple melody. Slow, rhythmic, rocking, lavender's blue, dilly, dilly, lavender's green. I froze. My blood ran cold. I knew that song. I knew every note of it. I knew the exact intake of breath between the verses. But I didn't remember Marianne singing it. I remembered Beth singing it. I remembered lying in a feverish haze when I was 6, my head pounding, and Beth sitting on the edge of my bed, stroking my hair and humming that exact tune. It was the one tender thing she had ever given me. It was the one memory I had held on to when I tried to convince myself she loved me. She stole the song. I whispered. I stared at the spinning tape wheels. Beth hadn't just stolen a baby. She had stolen the mothering. She had taken the song Marianne sang to me in the park, and she had co-opted it, using it to soothe the child she had kidnapped. She had built her bond with me on the wreckage of Marianne's love. It was a violation so intimate, it made me nauseous. It meant that even the few moments of comfort I had in that house were tainted. They were stolen goods. A knock at the door. It was Pierce again. He looked grim. He held a sheaf of papers in his hand. We got the DNA confirmation, he said. I looked at him, and it is a 100% match. He said, You are Lila Ray Sutter. The legal lock is shut. I nodded. I felt a strange sense of calm. The question mark that had hovered over my life for 29 years was gone. I was a sentence that ended in a period. But that is not all, Pierce said. He walked into the room and laid the papers on the bed next to the cassette player. I found the money. I looked at the spreadsheet. It was a dense grid of numbers, but one column stood out. The Lila Fund. What is this, I asked? It is a registered 501c3 charity, Pierce said. Established 1990, the stated mission is to provide resources for families of missing children. The founder and primary trustee is an entity called DK Holdings. Darren, I said. He set up a charity in the name of the child his wife kidnapped. Pierce said. His voice was laced with disgust. He solicited donations. He ran fundraisers. He collected grants. And for 20 years, he funneled 90% of that money into DK Holdings for administrative fees and consulting services. I stared at the numbers. The totals were in the hundreds of thousands. He was not just hiding me. I realized he was marketing me. He was using the tragedy of my disappearance to guilt people into giving him money, while the missing child was sleeping in his guest room eating leftovers. That is why he kept the file, Pierce said. That is why he needed you to disappear at 18. If you popped up with a valid ID, the Lila Fund would be audited. He needed you to be a ghost so the money would keep flowing. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was harder than diamond. He did not just let it happen, I said. He did not just cover for Beth. No, Pierce said. He looked at me with a dark intensity. Beth was the kidnapper, but Darren was the architect. He saw a crime and he turned it into a business model. I stood up. I picked up the cassette tape and put it in my pocket. I want him. I said, We are getting a warrant. Pierce said, We will pick him up at the border. No, I said. I turned to look at the agent. Warrants take time. Lawyers make bail. He has money stashed. If he crosses state lines, he disappears. He is good at disappearing people. He did it to me for 29 years. What are you suggesting? Pierce asked. He thinks he is in control. I said. He thinks I am a scared little girl who signed a paper and ran away. He thinks he still owns me. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I am going to let him think he is right. I said, I am going to make him come to me. You want to use yourself as bait? Pierce asked, his voice rising in alarm. That is against protocol. That is dangerous. It is the only way to catch him with the evidence on him. I said, If you arrest him now, he shreds the files. He claims the money was legitimate. He blames everything on Beth. But if he thinks he can buy my silence, if he thinks he can get me to sign one more paper to save his empire, I turned back to Pierce. He will bring the proof. He will bring the checkbook. and he will bring the arrogance that is going to hang him. Pierce looked at me. He saw the shift. He was not looking at a victim anymore. He was looking at a woman who had just realized that her entire life was a crime scene, and she was the lead detective. "I will talk to the director," Pierce said slowly. "But if we do this, we do it my way. Wires, snipers, total control." "Fine," I said. "Just make sure the recording is on. I want the world to hear him say it. Say what Pierce asked. I want him to say that I am not his blood." I said, "Because when he says that, he admits that he knew exactly whose blood I was all along." Pierce nodded and left the room to make the call. I sat back down on the bed. I touched the plastic of the cassette tape in my pocket. I looked at the map with the red lines. Lavender's blue, Dilly, Dilly. I hummed the tune. It sounded different now. It didn't sound like a lullaby. It sounded like a war drum. Darren Kincaid had spent 29 years erasing Lila Ray Sutter. He was about to find out that she was the one thing he couldn't delete. Revenge, I learned that morning, is not about passion. It is not about screaming in the rain or slashing tires in a dark parking lot. Revenge is paperwork. Revenge is a forensic audit. Revenge is a team of people in suits sitting around a mahogany table, deciding exactly how to dismantle a man's life piece by piece until there is nothing left but a prison number. I sat in the office of Elena Russo, a civil litigation attorney who had been recommended by the victim advocacy group working with Agent Pierce. The room smelled of expensive coffee and old leather. On one side of me sat Rowan Pierce, representing the criminal investigation. On the other was Graham Sutter, my father, who had insisted on funding the best legal counsel money could buy. I do not want him to just go to jail. I told Elena, jail gives him 3 meals a day. Jail gives him a bed. I want him to lose everything he built on my back. I want him to walk into that cell with 0 assets to his name. Elena nodded. She was a woman who looked like she sharpened her eyeliner with a scalpel. "We are looking at a pincer movement," she said, using a red pen to draw lines on a legal pad. "Agent Pierce handles the criminal side: kidnapping, custodial interference, wire fraud. I handle the civil side: intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, conversion of assets, unjust enrichment. We will freeze his accounts before he can buy a plane ticket. We will attach liens to every property he owns. By the time the criminal trial starts, he will be relying on a public defender because he won't be able to afford a parking meter." It felt good. It felt cold and solid, like a stone in my hand. For years, Darren had used bureaucracy to erase me. Now, I was going to use it to bury him. The breakthrough came an hour later, via a burner phone I had given to Jade. She had sent a photo of a keychain. It was a simple silver ring with a blue plastic tag that said, "You store it. Unit 404. I found this taped under the drawer of his desk. The text read, "He goes there every Tuesday night. He says it is his gym night. He hates the gym." Agent Pierce moved fast. Within 2 hours, he had a warrant signed by a federal judge. We drove to the storage facility, a bleak row of orange metal doors off Route 9. It was the kind of place people stored broken furniture and secrets they did not want to keep in the house. I watched from the car as Pierce and his team cut the lock. I was not allowed to touch anything, but I needed to see it. I needed to see the physical manifestation of the lie. When they rolled up the metal door, the smell hit us: dust, mildew, and stale paper. It was not full of furniture. It was an office. There was a desk, a filing cabinet, and a large, heavy-duty safe in the corner. Pierce's team went to work. They photographed everything. When they cracked the safe, Pierce waved me over, staying behind the caution tape. "Look," he said. Inside were stacks of cash, banded in $10,000 bundles, but the cash was boring. It was the paperwork that took my breath away. There were birth certificates, not just mine, but blanks. There were passports with Darren's face but different names, and there were receipt books, dozens of receipt books. Pierce picked one up with a gloved hand. It was branded with a logo, the Kincaid Foundation for Lost Children. I felt the blood drain from my face. "He had a charity?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Pierce flipped through the pages. It looks like he founded it in 1991. Pierce said, "The mission statement says it provides grants to families of missing children to help with search costs." He handed the book to another agent and picked up a ledger. "But look at the payouts," Pierce said, his voice hardening. 90% of the donations went to consulting fees paid to a shell company in Delaware. And guess who owns the shell company, Darren? I said. He did not just steal me, I realized, leaning against the door frame for support. He used me as a prop. He probably told donors, "I understand your pain. I have a missing child in my family too." He used the credibility of his adopted daughter's mysterious background to gain trust. And then he pocketed the money people gave to find their own stolen babies. It was a level of depravity that made the kidnapping almost seem quaint. Kidnapping was a crime of desperation. This was a crime of pure, unadulterated greed. I had been his cash cow. Every time he looked at me across the dinner table with that cold stare, he wasn't just seeing a burden, he was calculating his quarterly earnings. The news broke that afternoon. Not the details of the fraud Pierce was keeping that sealed to build the case, but the story of the kidnapping. The press had gotten wind of the activity at the federal building. Darren, realizing the walls were closing in, did exactly what I expected. He went on the offensive. I sat in the hotel room with Marianne and Graham, watching the local news. Darren had called a reporter from his lawyer's office. He was not in handcuffs yet. Pierce was waiting for the financial forensics to be airtight so he could nail him without bail, on the screen. Darren looked old and frail. He was wearing a cardigan I had never seen, looking like a confused grandfather. "This is a shakedown," Darren told the reporter, his voice trembling with feigned indignation. "That girl, Nora, she has always been trouble. We took her in when she was an orphan. We gave her a home. She was always mentally unstable. Now she sees a wealthy family like the Sutters, and she invents a story to get a payout. I am the victim here. She is destroying my reputation for money." Marianne gasped, clutching Graham's hand. "How can he lie like that? He knows the DNA is a match. He is banking on doubt." I said, staring at the screen. "He knows the DNA results haven't been made public yet. He wants to muddy the water. He wants to make me look like a grifter so that even if he gets arrested, he can claim I framed him." I stood up. I turned off the TV. "I need to make a statement." I said, Elena, the lawyer, was on speakerphone. "Do not get emotional. Nora, stick to the facts. I am not going to be emotional." I said, "I am going to be clinical." An hour later, I stood on the steps of the federal building. There was a sea of microphones. I did not wear the expensive clothes Marianne had offered to buy me. I wore my jeans and my flannel shirt. I wore the face of a woman who had worked the night shift in a warehouse. I stepped up to the podium. I did not cry. "My name is Lila Ray Sutter," I said. The cameras clicked furiously. 29 years ago, I was taken from my family. For the last 12 years, I have lived as Nora Green. Mr. Kincaid claims I am looking for a payout. I held up a piece of paper. It was the official DNA summary from the FBI lab. "This is science," I said. "It does not lie. But Mr. Kincaid is right about one thing. This is about money." I paused. The reporters leaned in. "It is about the money he made off my name." I said, "It is about the hundreds of thousands of dollars he solicited from this community for a charity that never helped a single child." I saw the shock ripple through the crowd. This was new information. This was the twist that turned him from a sympathetic victim into a monster. "I am not asking for a cent from the Sutters," I continued. "I am asking for an audit, and I am asking Mr. Kincaid why. If I was just a charity case he took in, he has a file in his safe dating back to 1989 with my baby photos in it." I walked away. I did not take questions. I had dropped the match. I did not need to watch the fire start. Back in the safe house, the atmosphere was electric. Pierce was on the phone, coordinating with the IRS and the banking regulators. "You rattled him," Pierce said. Hanging up, "We have a wiretap on his burner phone. He just called his offshore banker. He is trying to move the big accounts. He is panicking." "Good." I said, "Let him panic. Panic makes people sloppy. But we have a problem. Pierce said. He turned his laptop around. He is claiming that the money in the foundation was a trust for you. Pierce explained. He is telling his lawyer that he was saving it for you. But you ran away at 18 before he could give it to you. He is trying to pivot. He is going to say he is a benevolent guardian who was just waiting for you to return. It was a clever lie. It explained the money, and it explained why he hadn't spent it all. It made him look like a misunderstood savior. He needs proof that I refused the money. I said. Pierce nodded. Exactly. Unless we can prove he intended to keep it, he might walk on the fraud charges. He might just get a slap on the wrist for the paperwork errors. I closed my eyes. I went back to that day, the day I turned 18, the cold leather chair, the suitcases. Sign this, he had said. It is a voluntary departure agreement. I tried to visualize the paper. I had been crying. I had been terrified. I hadn't read it closely, but I remembered the layout. It wasn't just one page. It was 3. Wait, I said. My eyes snapped open. What Graham asked, the paper he made me sign. I said, he told me it was an agreement to leave the house. He said it was to protect Jade from me coming back and asking for money. I looked at Pierce. But why would he need a legal document for a teenager leaving home, I asked. Parents kick kids out every day. They change the locks. They don't make them sign affidavits. Pierce's eyes widened. He made you sign a waiver. Pierce realized. He made me sign away my claim to the trust, I said, the memory sharpening. I remember the wording on the last page. The signatory hereby relinquishes all rights, titles, and interests in the assets held by the Kincaid Guardian Trust. I stood up, pacing the room. He tricked me. I said, he set up the fake charity in my name, or rather, in the name of the orphan he took in. He funneled the money there. Then, the day I turned 18, the day the trust would legally vest to the beneficiary, he kicked me out and forced me to sign a document gifting the money back to him. That is grand larceny, Elena said from the phone. That is embezzlement. If we can find that document… Nora, he is done. It proves premeditation. It proves he didn't save the money for you. He stole it from you the second you were old enough to claim it. He won't have destroyed it. I said. Why not, Graham asked, if it is evidence of a crime? Because he is an accountant. I shouted, the realization hitting me like a lightning bolt. He keeps receipts. That document is his insurance policy. It is the only thing that proves he didn't just embezzle the funds. In his twisted mind, that paper proves I gave him the money. He thinks it exonerates him. Where is it? Pierce asked. It wasn't in the storage unit safe. I thought about the house. I thought about the one place Darren never let anyone go. The one place that was more secure than a bank vault because it was terrified into silence. The floor safe. I said, in the master bedroom closet, under the carpet. He used to tell me and Jade that if we ever went in there, the house alarm would go off and the police would shoot us. I looked at Pierce. He is packing to run. I said, he is going to take the physical assets. That document is worth $5 million to him. It is his get-out-of-jail-free card. He is not leaving without it. We need to get into that house, Pierce said. But if we raid it now, and he destroys the paper before we find it, no raid. I said. I looked at the map of the house I had drawn in my head 1,000 times, the escape routes I had planned as a child but never used. He invited me. I said, what Graham asked. On the news? I said, he said I was a troubled girl he tried to help. He is playing the heartbroken father. I turned to Pierce. Let me call him. Let me tell him I saw the news. Let me tell him I am scared of the FBI and I want to make a deal. I will tell him I will recant everything if he gives me $10,000 and a bus ticket. He won't believe you. Pierce said, he thinks I'm stupid. I said, he thinks I am the same scared girl who signed whatever he put in front of her. If I play the part, if I play the desperate, broken Nora Green, he will believe it because he needs to believe it. He needs me to be the villain so he can be the hero. I want to meet him. I said, I want to meet him at the house. I will wear a wire. I will get him to pull that document out of the safe. And once it is in his hand, then we take him down. Pierce finished. I looked at Marianne and Graham. They looked terrified. You do not have to do this, Marianne whispered. I do, I said. I looked at my hands. They were steady. He told me I wasn't his blood. I said, he was right. My blood is stronger than his, and tonight I am going to prove it. The conference room in Elena Russo's office was quiet enough to hear the hum of the hard drive sitting on the mahogany table. Elena, my civil attorney, sat with a posture that suggested she was about to surgically remove someone's vital organs without anesthesia. Agent Pierce stood by the window, looking at a tablet, while Graham and Marianne sat close together, holding hands like they were bracing for impact. I sat at the head of the table. I wasn't shaking anymore. The fear that had defined my life for 29 years had calcified into something harder, sharper. I was not a victim in this room. I was the CEO of my own vengeance. Elena slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a digital scan, retrieved from the archives of the bank where Darren had kept his accounts. Do you recognize this? Nora, Elena asked. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was shaky, looping, written with a cheap ballpoint pen. Nora Green. I signed this on my 18th birthday, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voluntary departure agreement. He told me it was just a liability waiver so I couldn't sue him for kicking me out. Elena shook her head slowly. It is titled a voluntary departure and relinquishment of assets, she corrected. But look at paragraph 4. I read the dense legal jargon. The undersigned beneficiary hereby waives all claim to the custodial account ending in 442. Transferring full executory control to the trustee, Darren Kincaid, in exchange for the dissolution of household debts. I looked up. Household debts. He charged you for living there, Elena said, her voice dripping with professional disgust. In his internal ledgers, he assigned a daily value to your room, your food, even your electricity usage. By the time you turned 18, he calculated that you owed him $40,000. This document was a trade. You signed over the trust fund to pay off a debt that didn't legally exist. Trust fund, I asked. The words felt alien in my mouth. Pierce turned from the window. We found the account, he said. It wasn't just the charity money. It was an insurance settlement. He walked over and tapped the table. When he fabricated your identity, he took out a rider on his homeowner's insurance for long-term dependent care. Then, he filed claims. Every time you had the flu, every time you needed dental work which he never actually paid for, he billed the insurance. He funneled that money into an account in your name. How much, I asked. By the time you were 18, Pierce said, that account held $215,000. The room spun. $215,000. I thought about the night I slept in the car behind the laundromat. I thought about the time I fainted at the warehouse from hunger because I had $2 to last me 3 days. I thought about the winter I didn't have a coat. He sat on $250,000 in my name, I whispered, and he gave me $40 and a bag of trail mix. He didn't just steal the money, Elena added. He used the trust to launder the donations from the fake charity. It was a circular system. Donations went in. He moved them to your trust to make it look like they were being used for a child's welfare. And then he forced you to sign it all back to him the second you became a legal adult. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, dark and hysterical. He is a genius, I said. A sick, twisted genius. He is a parasite, Graham said. His voice was low, but the anger in it vibrated through the table. He fed off you. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Jade. I picked it up. There was no text. Just a missed call and a voicemail. I dialed her back immediately. Jade Nora. Her voice was a whisper. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet. There is a car, a black sedan. It has been parked across the street from my dorm for 3 hours. Where are you? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. I am in the library, she said. I am scared. Nora, I think he knows I talked to you. I think he hired someone. I looked at Pierce. Darren has someone on Jade. I said. Pierce was already moving. He spoke into his radio. Dispatch. I need a unit at the university. Authorization code Beta 9. Possible witness intimidation. Go? He looked at me. She is safe. My guys are 5 minutes out. I spoke into the phone. Jade, listen to me. Police are coming. Do not go outside. Do not talk to anyone until you see a uniform. He is texting me. Jade sobbed. He keeps sending me messages saying, family loyalty is everything, and do not be a traitor like your sister. He is losing control. I told her. He is trying to scare you because he is terrified. Stay put. I hung up. My hands were trembling again, not from fear, but from rage. He could steal my money. He could steal my name. But threatening the only person in that house who had ever shown me kindness, that was a declaration of war. He is not going to stop. I said to the room, he is going to burn everything down to save himself. Marianne stood up. She looked small and pale, but her eyes were fierce. We have to stop this, she said. Lila, please, let the FBI handle it. Let the lawyers handle it. You are safe now. You have money, our money. You don't need to do this. I looked at her. I saw the mother who wanted to wrap me in cotton and hide me from the world. I understood it. She had lost me once. She didn't want to lose me to a crossfire. I can't just sit in a hotel room, Marianne. I said, I can't eat room service while he is out there terrorizing Jade. It is not your job, she cried. You are the victim. I am not the victim, I snapped. The volume of my voice startled everyone, including me. I stood up. I am the witness. I said, I am the evidence, and I am the only one who knows how his brain works. Graham stood up and walked over to me. He placed his hands on my shoulders. He was heavy, solid, grounding. You have a right to your anger, he said softly. He looked deep into my eyes. God knows, I have enough anger to burn this whole city down. But listen to me. Lila, if you hunt him down just to watch him bleed, he still wins, because he is still dictating your actions. He squeezed my shoulders. Don't let him decide who you become, he said. You are a Sutter. We are builders, not destroyers. I looked at this man, my father, who had spent 29 years searching for me without ever becoming a monster. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be good. But right now, I needed to be something else. I hear you, I said, but I can't build anything until I clear the rubble, and Darren Kincaid is the rubble. The door to the conference room burst open. An agent I didn't recognize rushed in and handed a tablet to Pierce. Pierce scanned it, his face going hard. He is gone, Pierce said. What Elena asked. We had eyes on the house, Pierce said. The team moved in to execute the search warrant 10 minutes ago. The house is empty. The safe is open and empty. The computer hard drives are drilled. He handed the tablet to me. He left a note. Pierce said, taped to the refrigerator. I looked at the image on the screen. It was handwritten on high-quality stationery. To the authorities, I am the victim of a coordinated extortion plot by a mentally unstable young woman I took in out of charity, and a wealthy family looking for a replacement child. The allegations against me are fabrications. I have left to seek legal counsel in a neutral jurisdiction, where I can prove my innocence without the bias of this witch hunt. God will vindicate the righteous. I handed the tablet back. He is playing the martyr. I said, he wants us to think he is running to a lawyer. He isn't. He is running to the money. Where did he go? Graham asked. We are tracking his phone, Pierce said. But he is smart. He swapped SIM cards. We got a ping off the tower near the interstate, heading south. He is 40 miles from the state line. If he crosses, we have jurisdiction issues until the federal warrant fully processes. We need to catch him now, but there is something else, Pierce said. He looked at me, and for the first time, he looked hesitant. In the storage unit, he said, in the back of the filing cabinet. We found another box. We didn't open it until the bomb squad cleared it. What was in it, I asked. It wasn't financial records, Pierce said. He pulled a thick binder out of his briefcase and laid it on the table. It was labeled Project Green. I stared at the binder. It was gray, innocuous. I opened it. The first page was a photo of me at age 6. Sleeping. The date was stamped in the corner. Subject Nora. Day 2. 190. Adaptation successful. Memory retention of previous life. Minimal. Compliance high. I flipped the page. Age 10. Subject shows signs of artistic interest. Discouraged behavior by removing supplies. Subject must not develop independent identity markers. I flipped another page. Age 14. Subject requested dental care. Denied. Pain serves as a useful distraction from questions of origin. I slammed the book shut. I felt like I was going to throw up. He wasn't just hiding me, I whispered. He was studying me. I was a lab rat. I looked at Graham and Marianne. They were horrified, clinging to each other. This wasn't a family, I said, my voice trembling with a new, darker rage. It was an experiment. He wanted to see if he could construct a person from scratch. He wanted to see if he could break a human being down to zero. I looked at Pierce. He didn't leave because he was scared. I said, he left because the experiment failed. I broke containment. Pierce nodded. And that is why we can catch him. How, I asked. He is a narcissist, Pierce said. He can't stand the idea that his creation is out of control. He is heading for the border. Yes, but he is hesitating. The GPS shows his car has stopped at a rest area 3 miles from the state line. He has been there for 20 minutes. Why, Elena asked. Because he doesn't have the waiver. I realized. I looked at the group. He emptied the safe, but he didn't find the original document because I stole it. I lied. Everyone looked at me. No, I didn't actually steal it. I clarified. But he thinks I might have, or he thinks I know where it is. He knows that without that original wet signature document, the offshore banks won't release the full $5 million. He needs one last thing from me. You want to call him? Pierce said. It wasn't a question anymore. I want to call him. I said, and I want to tell him I have the binder. I want to tell him I have the proof of his experiment, and I want to tell him I will trade it for the truth. It is a trap, Graham said. For you. He will kill you. Lila. He won't kill me, I said. To him. I am not a person. I am an asset. You don't destroy an asset until you have extracted all the value. I turned to Pierce. Wire me up, I said. Get your snipers ready. I am going to bring him back. Pierce looked at the binder, then at me. He saw the cold determination in my eyes. He knew he couldn't stop me. We do this my way. Pierce said, you stay in the car. We have a drone overhead. If he makes one move toward a weapon, we take him out. I nodded. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the number I had deleted 12 years ago but never forgotten. Dad. I deleted the contact name and typed in the architect. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Hello? Nora? His voice was calm, smooth, unbothered. It was the voice of the man who had ordered me to leave his house with 2 suitcases. Hello? Darren, I said. I hear you are telling stories on television, he said. Very dramatic. You always did have an active imagination, and you always had a bad habit of keeping notes. I said. There was a silence on the line. A sharp, distinct silence. I am holding a gray binder. I said. Project Green. It makes for very interesting reading. Subject compliance high. The silence stretched. I could hear his breathing. It was ragged. What do you want? He asked. The mask was slipping. The calm was cracking. I want to make a deal. I said, I am tired. Darren, I am tired of the FBI. I am tired of the Sutters crying on me. I just want to go away. I waited. Meet me, he said, where the rest stop off exit 90, the one with the abandoned truck scales. Come alone. Bring the binder. And the waiver I asked. You want that too, don't you? Bring everything, he said. And Nora. Yes. If I see one cop, I will drive this car into the river, and you will never see a dime of that money. I hung up. I looked at Pierce. He took the bait. I said. Pierce was already speaking into his headset. All units. Suspect is stationary at exit 90. We are moving the package. I repeat, we are moving the package. I stood up. Marianne grabbed my arm. Please, she whispered, come back to us. I looked at her, and then at the binder on the table. I am coming back. I promised. But first, I have to go bury Nora Green. The abandoned way station off exit 90 was a graveyard of concrete and rust. The floodlights buzzed with a dying, yellow flicker, casting long shadows that looked like grasping fingers. I stood in the center of the cracked pavement, clutching the gray binder to my chest. Under my flannel shirt, the wire taped to my sternum felt hot and itchy, a constant reminder that I was the bait in a trap I had set myself. Agent Pierce was in my ear, his voice a tiny metallic thread. "We have eyes on you. Drone is overhead. Snipers are on the ridge. Do not let him get you in the car." I did not answer. I could not. My throat was dry, and my heart was hammering against the wire. This was the place where it ended. 29 years of silence, of fear, of being told I was nothing. All led to this desolate patch of highway. Headlights swept across the darkness, blindingly bright. A black sedan rolled slowly into the lot, tires crunching over the gravel. It stopped 30 feet away. The engine cut, but the lights stayed on, pinning me in their glare. I shielded my eyes. The driver's door opened. Darren Kincaid stepped out. He looked exactly as he had on the news earlier that day, the weary, beleaguered grandfather, but as he walked into the pool of light, the mask slipped. His eyes were hard, calculating, scanning the perimeter for threats. He did not see the snipers camouflaged in the tree line. He did not see the drone hovering in the night sky. He only saw me. He stopped 10 feet away. He did not look at my face. He looked at the binder in my arms. "Give it to me," he said. His voice was not angry. It was bored. It was the voice he used when he asked for the tax returns. I tightened my grip on the binder. "You look tired." "Darren," I said, "running must be expensive." He sneered, a quick, ugly curling of his lip. "I am not running. Nora, I am relocating. There is a difference. Now, give me the property. You have caused enough damage with your little tantrums." I took a step back. "Why did you keep it?" I asked. I held the binder up. Project Green. Why keep a log? Why keep the photos? If I was just a burden, if I was just a stray you picked up to shut your wife up, why document every day of my life? Darren sighed. He checked his watch. "Because audits happen," he said coldly. "In business, you keep records. You never know when you need to prove an asset's depreciation." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "Depreciation," I repeated. "That is what I was to you. An asset that lost value the older I got." "You were an investment," he corrected, "and a poor one at that. You ate more than you were worth." "Then why didn't you let me go?" I shouted. My voice echoed off the concrete barriers. Why keep me for 29 years? Why the fake doctors? Why the terrifying stories about the police? Why did you make me sign that paper when I was 18? He took a step closer. The arrogance was radiating off him now. He felt safe. He felt superior. He thought he was talking to the stupid, scared girl he had broken. "Because you do not just throw away a revenue stream," he snapped. "The charity brought in 6 figures a year. The insurance fraud brought in more. You were the golden goose, Nora. But you were too stupid to know it." He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "I signed those checks for you," he said. "I managed the accounts. I built a fortune on your sob story while you were crying in your room about not having a winter coat. That is not a crime, Nora. That is management." I stared at him. The wire was recording every word. But I needed the nail in the coffin. I needed him to admit to the one thing that would put him away for life. "You stole me," I said. "You knew Beth took me, and you kept me. I did not steal you." He scoffed. "I salvaged you." He stepped into my personal space. I could smell his expensive cologne, masking the scent of his fear. "You are not my blood," he hissed, leaning down to look me in the eye. That was his favorite weapon, the line that had cut me 1,000 times. "Do not think for a second that you have any power here. You are a biological stranger, a parasite I allowed to feed at my table." I looked him dead in the eye. I did not flinch. "If I am not your blood," I asked quietly, "then why were you so afraid of me having a doctor? Why were you so afraid of me having a school picture?" He grabbed my arm. His grip was painful, bruising. Because you are ungrateful, he spat. No, I said. I pulled my arm back, but he held on. Tell me, Darren, why? He lost it. The facade cracked, the rage he had been suppressing for days. The anger at his perfect life being dismantled by a thing he owned, boiled over. Because I let you live, he screamed. The words tore out of him. I could have killed you the day she brought you home. I could have buried you in the basement and no one would have known I gave you a name. I gave you a life, I let you exist. The silence that followed was absolute. I let you live. It hung in the air, a confession of total, godlike control. He had just admitted that my survival was his choice, a whim he had granted. I looked at him. I felt a sudden, strange pity, not for him, but for the man he thought he was. You didn't let me live, I said. You just forgot to kill me. And that was your mistake. I looked up at the dark ridgeline. Now I screamed. The night exploded. Floodlights from the tree line snapped on. Blinding white. Sirens wailed from the access road. A dozen red laser dots appeared on Darren's chest. Federal agents, drop to your knees. Now. The voice of Agent Pierce boomed over a loudspeaker. Darren froze. He looked around wildly, blinking in the glare. He looked at the lights, then at me. His face went from rage to confusion to terror in the span of a heartbeat. He let go of my arm. He stumbled back. Nora. He gasped. Nora, tell them. Tell them I was helping you. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. I stood still. I watched as armored agents swarmed the lot. I watched as they kicked his legs out from under him. I watched as his face hit the gravel. Tell them, he shrieked as they cuffed his hands behind his back. I am your father. I took care of you. I walked over to where he lay, pinned to the ground. Agent Pierce was standing over him, reading him his rights. I crouched down. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see Lila. You are not my father. I said. My voice was calm, clear, and cold as ice. And you are right. I am not your blood. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. You don't hate me because I'm not your blood. Darren, you hate me because I am the evidence you couldn't shred. Agent Pierce pulled him up. Darren was sobbing now, a pathetic, broken sound. He was begging, bargaining, trying to sell out Beth, trying to sell out anyone to save himself, but the wire had caught it all. I let you live. It was over. I watched them shove him into the back of a van. The door slammed shut. It was done. The days that followed were a blur of legal victories. The recording was admissible. The financial records in the binder, the Project Green binder, were the map that led forensic accountants to every dollar he had stolen. They found the offshore accounts. They found the shell companies. They verified the insurance fraud. Beth Kincaid pleaded guilty. She testified against Darren in exchange for a reduced sentence. She sat on the stand, looking old and small, and told the jury everything. She told them how Darren had orchestrated the cover-up, how he had set up the fake charity, how he had coached her on what to say to the neighbors. She took responsibility for the kidnapping, but she nailed him to the cross for the 29 years of torture that followed. Jade testified too. She was brave. She walked into the courtroom with her head held high and told the jury about the different food, the cold rooms, the psychological warfare Darren had waged against me. She looked at him across the courtroom and didn't blink. She broke the cycle of fear he had built. When the verdict came down, Darren didn't look at me. He stared at the table. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called him a predator who monetized human suffering. His assets were seized. Every car, every house, every hidden account. The money was returned to the donors of the fake charity, and a significant portion was awarded to me as restitution for the wages he had stolen and the trust he had embezzled. But the money didn't matter. What mattered was the piece of paper I held in my hand 3 weeks later. I sat in a courtroom, but this time, it wasn't for a trial. It was a hearing. Marianne and Graham sat behind me. Owen was on my right. The judge looked at the petition. You wish to restore your birth identity, she asked. Yes, Your Honor. I said, You understand this will legally change your name on all federal and state documents from Nora Green to Lila Ray Sutter. I nodded, but then I paused. Actually, Your Honor, I said, I would like my legal name to be Lila Nora Sutter. The judge looked surprised. You want to keep the name Nora? I looked at Marianne. She was smiling, tears in her eyes. She understood. Nora is the one who survived. I said, Nora is the one who walked out in the snow with 2 suitcases. Nora is the one who fought back. I don't want to erase her. She got me here. The judge smiled. So ordered, she said. The gavel banged. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight. It was spring. The air smelled of wet earth and growing things. We went back to the hotel. But we were checking out. We were going home. Not to a safe house. To Columbus. To the house with the oak tree in the front yard. I sat on the sofa in the suite, packing the last of my things. The gray binder was in the trash. I didn't need it anymore. Graham came over and sat next to me. Ready, he asked. I zipped up my bag. It was a new bag, expensive leather, not a trash bag or a beat-up suitcase. I am ready, I said. Owen threw an arm around my shoulder. Mom is making lasagna tonight. She says she remembers you liked cheese when you were 10 months old. We are hoping the preference held up. I laughed. It felt light. It felt easy. I love cheese, I said. My phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized. I almost ignored it, thinking it was a reporter, but then I saw the area code. DC, I answered. Hello, Lila. It was Agent Rowan Pierce. Agent Pierce, I said, or should I say, the man who put Darren away. We did that together. He said, Listen, I am calling because, well, something came up. What is it? I asked. Is Darren appealing? No, Pierce said. He is done. This is something else. I heard the rustle of papers on his end. When we raided his storage unit, we found that binder, Pierce said, but we also found a hard drive in the false bottom of the safe. We just cracked the encryption. I felt a prickle of curiosity. What was on it? I asked. Lists, Pierce said. Names. It turns out, Darren wasn't just running a fake charity. He was networking. He was in contact with other people doing the same thing. Other guardians hiding children to exploit the system. I stood up. The room went quiet. Graham and Marianne looked at me, sensing the shift. What are you saying, Rowan? I asked. I am saying there are more files, he said. There are more kids. Kids who think they are orphans. Kids who think they are not blood. We are opening a task force. I need a consultant. Someone who knows the psychology. Someone who knows how to spot the lies in the paperwork. I looked at my family. I looked at the peace I had just found. I could go to Columbus. I could eat lasagna and learn to be a daughter. I could rest. But then I thought about the girl sleeping in a car behind a laundromat. I thought about the boy being told he wasn't allowed to eat dinner with the family. I looked at Graham. He saw the fire in my eyes. He nodded. Go. His eyes said, We will be here. I took a deep breath. I am listening. I said, I can have a car pick you up in an hour. Pierce said, We have a lead in Detroit. I smiled. It was a dangerous, sharp smile. The smile of Nora Green. Don't send a car, I said. I will drive myself. I have a lot of frequent flyer miles to use up. I hung up the phone. I picked up my bag. Where are you going? Owen asked. I am going to work. I said. I walked out of the hotel room, flanked by the family I had found, walking toward a future I was about to build. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a hunter. And for the monsters like Darren Kincaid hiding in the dark, I was coming for them. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and reclamation. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please drop a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed seeing Nora take down the man who stole her life, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful dramas to life.